But if you graduated high school over a decade ago, it was unlikely that you knew anyone who was transgender because, according to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the condition underlying it afflicted roughly 1
I'm
in
just going live
10,000
on
people,
Facebook.
or 0.01% of the population. Almost none of these cases were teenage girls. In fact, before 2012, there was no scientific or medical literature discussing adolescent girls who wanted to transition to the opposite sex.
What?
It doesn't mean that we didn't know about transgender individuals. Gender dysphoria, the severe discomfort in one's biological sex, has been studied for nearly 100 years. It almost always involved boys who began feeling it between the ages of 2 and 4 and were strong and persistent in their assertions to everyone around them that they were really girls. When a phenomenon that affects one half of a population, boys, suddenly begins affecting the other half, girls, and when its age of onset
So it's boys'
shifts
fault.
from preschool to
The
adolescence,
boys' fault?
something significant is happening.
Deal.
In 2016, Brown University public health researcher Lisa Littman began studying the sudden spike in trans identification of teenage girls. She concluded that peer influence and social media influence had a lot to do with this trans teen phenomenon. After all, based on parent reports, none of these girls had exhibited symptoms of gender dysphoria at the age that it typically first presents, early childhood. YouTube, Reddit, Tumblr, TikTok, and Instagram all host popular social media influencers, today's version of Hollywood stars, who insist that if you feel uncomfortable in your body, you're probably trans. Many promise that if you start a course of testosterone, all of your problems will
Lord
go
help
away.
us all.
There's every reason to believe that these girls are experiencing real psychological pain. Rates of anxiety, depression, and instances of self-harm are all at record levels for this generation. A quick fix becomes very tempting. So it doesn't take much, a YouTube video, a friend's suggestion, to get a troubled girl to buy into the fantasy that gender transition is the answer. Unfortunately for these girls who do not have typical gender dysphoria, gender transition rarely offers relief. And it's a catastrophic mistake for psychologists, educators, and the medical establishment to rush these teens towards a solution that will almost certainly harm rather than heal. Because here's what's not in dispute. Unnecessary medical gender transition causes irreversible damage, high risk of infertility, sexual dysfunction, and the creation of a permanent medical patient. Tragically, we've made it far too easy for kids to take this path, long before they're ready psychologically or emotionally to make such a life-altering decision. Testosterone is easily obtained by today's teens. In Oregon, a 15-year-old can walk into a gender clinic. Yes, there are now gender clinics all over the country, and walk out the same day with a prescription for testosterone without a parent's permission. 16-year-old girls have been able to undergo double mastectomies, the removal of both breasts, without even a therapist's note.
Bull.
Predictably, hasty gender transition, remember we're talking about teenagers here, is now leading to a lot of regret. New testimonials appear on YouTube almost every week from teens who acknowledge that they made a terrible mistake and warn others not to make the same one. So how do you protect your daughter from being drawn into this dangerous and
What about
trend?
boy?
First, limit their exposure to social
What about
media
boys?
as much as you can. Several academic studies have already linked the alarming rates of anxiety and depression to young girls' punishing experience on social media, a place that often makes them feel sad, unattractive,
What did he yell?
and alone. Second, oppose the teaching of
Is
gender
he with
ideology in your kids'
Okay.
school. In California, gender identity education begins in kindergarten and proceeds through high school. The theme is that kids' gender identity is totally independent of their physical sex and something that only they can know. Schools can and should insist that every child be treated respectfully without sowing gender confusion in an entire student population.
Oh my God.
Third, and most importantly, remember that a teenager is still just a teenager. You don't have to agree with every identity proclamation your daughter comes up with. Knowledge of her identity will develop over time. Until then, Being the adult in the relationship
Wait, no.
is the most loving
Does that
thing you
make
can
me
do.
safe since I only
I'm
have
Abigail
boys? I
Schreiber,
don't have to be here
author of Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters for Becker Minnesota.
Hello. How are you?
Hey, Sarah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, yeah? Did I take your spot?
Oh, no, you don't.
Okay.
It's literally a public thing. It's like freedom of speech. They're not being respectful, and why do we have to?
Gender dysphoria exists from birth or from rapid onset. The LGBTQ+ community declares that a transgender person is the actual other sex and that the authentic self has finally been recognized. To obtain the look of their authentic self, social transition is a first step, and this is called gender expression. This can be done at almost any age and could be the sole and permanent change. This is reversible, but could be emotionally difficult. Sometimes, however, when a child is prepubescent, generally age 10 or 11 for girls or 11 to 12 for boys, puberty blockers are given to suppress the body's normal production of the hormones which induce biological changes, which would be estrogen or testosterone. Puberty blockers prevent the development of normal sex characteristics such as vocal cord changes, development of breast tissue, or changes in facial structure that are irreversible. There are also questions whether these drugs play a role in a child's neurological development and bone growth, and possibly brain development. According to Dr. Rob Garfalo, director of the Lurie Children's Hospital Gender and Sex Development Program, what makes the treatment tricky is that there is no test to tell whether a child experiencing distress about their gender will grow up to be transgender. Statistics show that 80 to 95% of children, if left alone, grow out of any gender distress. And
Oh my
their
God.
birth sex. Puberty blockers shut the window of opportunity, and the body recognizes as the time to hormonally move from a child to an adolescent physical person, as Outfront also stated. The cost for puberty blockers as an implant can be as high as $43,000 per year. Inevitably, the use of puberty blockers will lead to the use of cross-sex hormones at age 16, which change the physical characteristics of the person to the opposite sex. At some point, as was discussed in the video, this becomes irreversible. In the case of girls who want to identify as boys, permanently lowered voices and facial hair will remain even if the drugs that caused it are discontinued. The cost for cross-sex hormones, which will need to be taken during the lifetime of the person wishing to present as the opposite sex, averages about $2,000 a year. They are all powerful drugs, and especially with cross-sex drugs, there is the possibility of health problems, such as acne, mood swings, higher risk for heart disease or diabetes later in life, blood clots for those on estrogen, and an unknown risk for cancer. The most detrimental consequence is the possibility of infertility. At this tender age, few children consider a future family with biological children of their own. The World Professional Organization for Transgender Health.
You're making the baby
that
cry.
Surgery should follow cross-sex hormones. There are many different types of surgeries with varying costs. For instance, male to female. This cost could be as close to $100,000. Female to male. This cost could be as close as $89,000. Now note that these are idealized results, and not everyone who undergoes surgery will look like the models in the pictures.
What?
These surgical costs, however, do not include
Can I?
lifetime drugs
I want-
that are
yeah, I
necessary
want
to
that.
maintain the cross-sex characteristics. The first gender clinic was Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic in 1966. Since then, as many as 300 gender clinics now exist, and more are popping up everywhere to provide drugs and surgery. The point of listing all the possible costs in the burgeoning gender clinics is to question whether there's more to the transgender agenda than a mere self-declaration of being the opposite sex. Dissatisfaction with one's body could lead to a lifetime of drugs and possible surgery,
Oh my
all at great financial cost. Some suggest that there is a gender industrial complex at work, a trifecta of greed and predation, big pharma, gender clinics, and cosmetic surgeons. The business of transitioning can be seen with the global sex reassignment surgery market expected to grow by almost $210 million during the 2021 to 2025 period, with predictions of growth almost quadrupling to over $780 million by 2027. Transgender advocates make no mention of doctors violating their historic Hippocratic oath of first, do no harm. Does destroying healthy tissue by breast removal or castration constitute good medical care?
Yep.
Walt Heyer and Kira Bell, well-known formerly transgender persons who retransitioned, would tell you no.
Cool.
Outfront's own statistics show that LGBTQ plus kids are at risk and deserve our support. This is evidenced by their reporting discrimination, high levels of harassment, and heightened risk of suicide. These are serious problems. Suicide is the most alarming issue regarding transgender kids.
Bang, bang, bang.
Because of something like this.
Why is it that attempted and completed suicide are far more prevalent among transgender persons?
Yes. You. She is.
People who are affected by this.
Actually, we'd like to know I'm very sensitive.
Not BS.
Very sensitive to suicide because I had a brother that committed suicide.
Then why are you not being more sensitive now? You are talking about children.
The Williams Institute of UCLA School of Law in 2014 reported that the prevalence of suicide attempts among people who self-identify as transgender is 41%, which vastly exceeds the 4.6% of the overall U.S. population who report a lifetime suicide attempt. Does transitioning cure that problem? Some studies show that suicide remains the same or even increases after transitioning, since underlying problems continue to exist. Is medical transitioning the only answer? Whether the majority of these individuals who have self-harmed will ultimately benefit from medical transition is unknown. And for young people, this will not be known for years, if not decades. But there's absolutely nothing in the Williams survey analysis to indicate that medical transition will decrease suicidal intent or self-harm.
Prove it.
Williams Institute data, if looked at honestly, should instead spur providers to offer effective psychological health evaluation and treatment to both young people and their families, and the least invasive intervention possible. Changing social acceptance of gender expression is another goal. Dr. Kenneth Zucker, a renowned expert on child dysphoria, promoted watchful waiting for the youngest, an earlier standard for parents of children suspected of having gender dysphoria. But now, parents are told that only transitioning will help, that it is better to have a live son than a dead daughter. Experts disagree and call this emotional blackmail. Trans activists point to the high number of suicides as justification for parents to allow transition to occur. There is no discussion about the potential of underlying mental health concerns, only whether there is consistent, persistent, and insistent belief. On the opposite side, experts and persons who retransition say that parents permitting transition are engaging in the equivalent of child abuse.
Are you kidding me?
A retransitioned man to woman to man who did so in his 50s declared, "The moment you affirm a child is at the very moment you're telling them there's something wrong with them. You're not right. This is child abuse. We need to begin calling it what it is."
What you're doing is child abuse.
Neuroscientist and writer states, upon reaching puberty and welcoming romantic
I don't know if I
interest in
can
their
stay this
peers,
whole thing. This
the
is
majority
really
of children
pissing me the
who
fuck
once
off.
felt discomfort with their bodies grow to be comfortable in them. This is because gender identity is flexible
Oh, yeah.
in pubescent children
You don't
and
know
grows
me.
more stable with development age. One parent asked, "Is it really harmless to tell a child who still believes in the tooth fairy that he's the opposite sex? Besides,
What?
You have to do with anything.
Well, she's giving statistics from like 9 years ago and the tooth fairy.
we do not allow children to get tattoos or piercings, to drive,
I
vote,
do.
drink, or buy cigarettes because they lack the emotional maturity to
My son has both of his ears pierced.
You can literally get your ears
It's
pierced
a
and get
tough
a
spot
tattoo
for
under your
parents,
teeth.
but could provide an opportunity for parents and schools to work together to find unity, not in opposition.
Are we
According
done
to the
yet?
Cedars-Sinai study, most gender dysphoria in kids
89
is known by
slides.
the age of 7.
Oh, I know.
As
I
already
looked through all of them
mentioned,
today.
watchful waiting was the road to take. Even the World Professional Association on Transgender Health states in its standards of care guidelines that 73 to 94%
Someone just told
of
me,
children
"No, you need to stay.
will
We need you
align
there."
with their birth
Yes,
sex
please.
if allowed to
Okay,
pass through
Cindy, I'll try.
without medical interventions like puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or sex reassignment surgery. Now, watchful waiting has been replaced with accept and affirm. Outfront told you that if a child, whatever the age, expresses any interest in becoming a transgender person, the school should accept and affirm.
Woo!
This is also the position of the Minnesota School Boards Association. But some claim that the affirmation-only strategy demanded by people and organizations with political and financial incentives is a way to drive children toward lifelong medicalization. Trans persons are humans to be loved and
Woo!
deserve a life without harassment and violence, as does everyone.
Woo!
Accept and affirm.
Except? You were gonna really say except. Oh God, I really don't think I can handle this. I'm gonna have a heart attack.
And affirm, however, does not mean believe for many.
Don't believe.
For the majority of kids, transgender is a foreign concept and hard to understand.
My
For
heart
our
is
youngest,
pounding.
Sex isn't even a concept that they've thought about and should not be a concept that the school introduces. But now it seems to have crept into the books, educational materials, videos, and films that even the youngest are seeing.
Good.
LGBTQ plus community says it is normal and relentlessly promotes that viewpoint. Those with a religious and
Cite your sources! God is gay!
Leave God out of school.
Bang, bang, bang.
For them, the transgender category violates fundamental truths. For those of faith who are protected by the First Amendment, there are only two sexes.
I am faithful and I believe in all.
Science that have not succumbed to woke ideology, there are only two sexes.
I'm sorry.
men
I
and
just
women.
can't keep my mouth
That
quiet.
is
One sex and there's a rib.
Right. I'm not a rib. I'm not a rib.
These people's opinions ought to be given equal consideration and not categorized as
Ashlyn,
intolerant,
I'm not a rib.
judgmental, bigoted, unsupported, transphobic, hateful, even evil for daring to offer a different opinion than the LGBTQ plus advocates.
It's because you're killing us.
Under our Constitution and judicial rulings, those
No way. Oh, I can't. This is disgusting.
Those who sincerely hold their beliefs are protected from the government prohibiting them to do so. But importantly, those who hold beliefs are prohibited from demanding that the government force others to adopt those beliefs.
Nobody's forcing
While
you.
transgender women may sincerely believe that they are women, not all women go along with that.
Too bad.
Many radical feminists argue against trans women being women. A prominent rad femme, Kara Dansky, insists that one can be called anything they so desire and dress accordingly, but the actual becoming of the opposite sex does not happen.
Because you don't accept it.
Up in arms, claiming that all the advances that have been made to protect girls and women, such as Title IX, are being destroyed when men identifying as trans women invade the province of naturally born women, whether in entertainment, sports, prisons, or elsewhere. If a trans girl or trans woman retains all the anatomical elements of a man, exposure in a natal female venue could harm the sensibilities of those natal females. Is this a self and welcoming environment for all? Perhaps it may be that a new category will be defined as the turmoil in college sports illustrates regarding the trans woman swimmer, Leah Thomas. She must take hormones to suppress her natural testosterone, but the male advantages that she inherited in her DNA give her an almost insurmountable advantage over natal women. The sports world is unsure of what to do about this. One state's legislature, South Dakota, resolved the issue by enacting a bill that prevents trans women from...
I thought we wanted to keep politics out.
And on March 3 of this year, Iowa's Governor Kim Reynolds did the same. This is not the case in Minnesota high school sports, as the Minnesota State High School League in 2015 specifically allowed trans women to compete with natal women.
Woohoo!
In conclusion, I ask the board to consider what it can do to ensure that the rights of all students are respected without alienating local culture and values or human rights of any.
There are kids. The fucking culture.
I would caution that enacting specific policies, although proactive, may not be the best approach at this time. Instead, a wait-and-see approach is suggested, allowing time for evaluating state and national court cases to further provide a better direction. But other viewpoints, as with this presentation, should always be considered if possible. First, prevent lawsuits by following existing district policies and practices, applicable court decisions and the law, all of which should be enumerated and published so citizens will understand why particular actions are or are not taken, such as transgender persons' use of bathrooms and locker rooms, overnight school trips, school and athletic programs. This guarantees transparency. Consider providing consent forms asking a parent for specific instructions required for any school activity in which their children would participate. The guiding principle is that school boards have a duty to represent all students and be sensitive to parental rights.
Oh, we should just give them tattoos
Second,
with numbers.
ensure that parents are notified by the school immediately if their child
Just the girls, though?
has interest in
Okay.
or wants to transition.
So I'm safe.
Even if the child asks not to do so, unless the child is verifiably endangered. This means any student under the age of 18 unless they are emancipated. Parents are the foremost guarantors of their child's education, safety, and best interests. They are their child's moral compass. It is important for all Becker students to be grounded in the concept of belonging to a whole community.
Her youngest graduated in
Third,
02
teachers, parents, and children
with me.
retain constitutional
Yeah.
rights in an educational setting. If
So she's
genuine
an
faith
old
or
parent.
understanding of science prevents them from adopting a policy of accept and affirm, retaliation in any form should not be tolerated. Transgender kids, like all kids, need to understand the world doesn't revolve around them.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
And that all students need to treat each other with kindness and compassion.
But there's always a but.
Being required to violate their own beliefs. Use of a new name
Violate?
and preferred pronouns should be an option for those interacting
Hell no, we won't go.
Fourth, the newest study by the Williams Institute finds that most suicide attempts, about 61%, among LGBTQ people occurred within
LGBTQ.
realizing one's sexual minority identity. Signs of psychological fragility should optimally be detected by parents first, but also by school counselors, and reported to teachers for observation and follow-up as mandated by state statute. However, policies or procedures regarding this issue should be carefully crafted to insulate the school and its personnel from liability for failure to recognize those signs. Fifth, the school should carefully consider whether it should be held responsible for monetary damages.
Yes.
Transgender student later retransitions and then claims that the school improperly affirmed and accepted
Oh my
what she
God.
was diagnosed and treated as a psychological issue.
Oh, Lord help us all.
That's called gaslighting.
Studies show
Amen.
that there is an underlying condition to gender dysphoria, primarily depression, suicidal ideation, and
Because of people like you.
and ADHD.
Oops.
in younger kids ages
I heard you.
9. The
I
board
got you.
considered the approach taken in the UK. Get a consent form signed by both parents or primary legal parent, plus a diagnosis from a psychologist or psychiatrist, not a school counselor, that recommends the transition. Without a recognition of possible underlying causes, the number of transgender kids in school is only going to increase according to current statistics.
Woo!
Non-binary is the growing segment. Whether or not we believe that those kids truly suffer from gender dysphoria or are caught up in a social contagion or an underlying condition, decisions
I can't.
have to be made to accommodate them and their peers. We all want simple answers for helping.
No, you don't.
Accepting and affirming them with a name change and use of preferred pronouns is only a band-aid, though, perhaps effective in the short term, but it may not be in their best interest in the long term.
Prove it.
And choices made now will impact the rest of the student population that sees a protected class given preferential treatment to the detriment of themselves.
You are the detriment.
And logic thrown out when unadulterated science can helpfully provide answers. No matter one's belief, however, kindness and compassion should be extended to everyone.
Woo! That's not what you're doing.
And as the middle school book Wonder teaches, resilience, a sense of humor, and tossing out any sense of being a victim will create the opportunities for a happy life.
Bullshit. It does not say that. That was way to twist the words. I just said bullshit in the school. Oopsie. Oh, good. An old white man.
I'm not with her.
that versus this.
Good evening.
We have much more support.
Entitled "The Danger of a Single Story." I understand this particular TED Talk is even shown to Becker students in some of our classrooms. After listening to it, I thought it might be appropriate to reference it tonight. The woman who gave the talk said, quote, "The danger of only hearing a single story is not that the story may be false. The real danger of a single story is that it is incomplete." Outfront presented their story about the transgender legal issues last August. I'm not claiming that what Outfront said regarding the law was false, only that it was incomplete. So tonight, I will tell you the rest of the story.
Oh God.
While I have been a licensed practicing attorney in Minnesota for the last 33 years, I'd like to note at the outset that nothing I say tonight is intended as legal advice for you or anyone else. I'm simply presenting information concerning the shifting legal landscape to help inform the board as to all the issues involved. I've heard the district's goal is to make Becker schools safe and welcoming for all students. It is my hope the information presented here tonight will help you in reaching that goal.
Nope.
Because my time is short, I would like to briefly cover 3 points tonight. Number one, the laws are still evolving. When Outfront made their presentation last August, they highlighted court cases which might suggest the legal questions have been settled on these issues. I can assure you that is not the case. Even the Outfront attorney admitted the law isn't settled when she said there is a split in the courts applying the law on these issues. The courts are indeed split in their decisions because the law is constantly trying to balance and reconcile competing claims. One example currently in the headlines is the Title IX dispute involving a transgender woman competing in collegiate women's sports. Title IX was originally passed in 1972 when transgender issues weren't even heard of.
Bull.
Its original purpose was to give women athletes a fair playing field compared to men's athletics. Now the courts must attempt to balance the rights of women athletes with those of transgender athletes,
Yes, they do.
something Title IX never contemplated when it was written. As a consequence of this uncertainty in the laws, the school board is walking a legal tightrope between balancing the competing rights of transgender students and the rights of the rest of the students in the district.
All students.
Not an easy balancing act to achieve. My second point tonight, the challenges presented by First Amendment issues. The Outfront attorney did not address First Amendment issues at all. She simply glossed over them saying, quote, "The First Amendment cuts both ways and can put schools in a challenging position." That was all she said about it. Yes, the First Amendment does indeed cut both ways, making the legal tightrope the school board is attempting to walk even more instead. Now, the next thing I will say seems so obvious and self-evident that I shouldn't even have to say it out loud, especially not in a public school where civics, American history, and government are supposedly taught on a daily basis.
Supposedly.
But let me just say it anyway, just to make it perfectly clear. Freedom of expression is a fundamental human right. Freedom of speech is a fundamental human right. Both rights are enshrined in our First Amendment, but also acknowledged and affirmed in the International Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, which states, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. No one's voice can be silenced just because some people labeled it as hate speech. That is not the state of the law now, nor has it ever been in the last 240 years of our history.
So keep spreading hate.
It's clear that those who wish to silence us simply don't understand the First Amendment. They don't
You're making the
understand
baby
that
cry again.
neither they nor some self-appointed watchmen
Huh?
are the judges who has the right to speak.
I just hide myself real good so they can't see who's yelling.
Students are asking protection of their human rights. The school board must also protect those very same human rights for the rest of the students as well.
All students.
And please remember, human rights are not just reserved for those in a protected class. But here's something else that Outfront didn't tell you last August. Embedded in those human rights of free expression is the fundamental human right not to be compelled to speak or affirm something with which you disagree.
Who's forcing?
Fundamental human right from compelled speech brings us to the discussion of the use of pronouns. The entire concept of freedom of speech is the individual's right to choose to say something, but just as importantly, the right to choose not to say something with which the individual disagrees. To put it simply, if we are free to speak what we want, we are also equally free not to speak what we don't want.
And that's the problem.
Out front, discuss the desire of students who wish to be addressed using pronouns in accordance with their transgender status. We are certainly free to use those pronouns, but only if we wish to do so. And here's the truth. The problem arises when the use of these pronouns becomes mandatory or even favored by a
Respectful.
At that point, the school district, as a government entity, is engaging in the prohibited practice of compelling the speech of a student. Over and over again, the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that no one can be compelled to speak or affirm something with which they disagree. Bottom line, the Constitution prohibits the school as a government entity from compelling speech. As you are no doubt aware, the Becker School District already has in place a policy that prohibits a form of compelled speech. Becker policy number 531 states, quote, anyone who does not wish to participate in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance for any personal reason may elect not to do so. Students and school personnel must respect another person's right to make that choice. If this principle is true for the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance, I would submit it is also true for the compelled use of pronouns.
No.
Don't say anything at all.
Yeah, keep it to yourself.
You are conflating two different topics, sir.
They're not being respectful, Mark.
He's making arguments that make no sense to scare you.
In the 1943 Barnett case, which established this principle, Justice Robert H. Jackson famously wrote, if there is any fixed principle in our Constitution, it is that no government official can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or act their faith therein. The recent Merriweather case in federal court found the school violated the teacher's right not to be compelled to use their students' preferred pronouns as being protected by the First Amendment. The recent California law that actually attempted to criminalize misgendering was quickly struck down on constitutional grounds. Other cases have reached similar rulings. Any policy to the contrary adopted by Becker schools will be on its face a potential violation of constitutional rights. So allow me to pose a hypothetical question to the school board to consider. How will the school board respond when a teacher insists her students must use preferred pronouns in her class?
It's always the woman.
And a student objects on the grounds of compelled speech. Will the teacher be held accountable for violating the student's constitutional rights?
Hopefully.
Or is it okay that the student be scolded by the teacher and given a failing grade class in retaliation for not using the right pronoun?
You're not allowed to retaliate anyways. What are you talking about?
Will the student's academic transcript be tarnished with pronoun violations if the student chooses to exercise their basic human right not to say or affirm something with which they disagree?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
If that is the case, how can Becker claim it is a safe and welcoming learning environment for that student as well?
Oh my God.
How many lawsuits, civil and human rights violations does the school district want to defend if they attempt to compel the use of pronouns? The legal tightrope you are on just became even more shaky.
Good.
My next point, viewpoint discrimination by a government entity is prohibited. I touched on this issue last week when I addressed the school board, asking for the opportunity to speak tonight. In short, the school district nor its teachers can promote one viewpoint and silence another. This is particularly important in light of our front urging everyone to affirm and accept transgender students by only using their preferred pronouns. If the school fails to maintain strict neutrality in this area, it might also violate the constitutional prohibition against viewpoint discrimination. My final point. Who's
This
in
sure sounds
and
like
who's out?
legal advice.
Our front emphasized that transgender students are to be treated as a protected class. But creating such a distinction among our students begs the question of who's in that protected class and who's out. First, I would ask the school board to define when is a student transitioned enough to merit that consideration. Will the school district be the judge when that has occurred? But remember, Outfront insisted that an individual's gender can be fluid. A transgender person is free to self-identify their individual gender in any way they want and at any time. So according to Outfront, it is not the school that makes that determination. It must be the student themselves. So when does a student become a member of the protected class? On the day they choose to self-identify? Or must some period of time have elapsed before they have proven they are in fact transitioned? What if, for argument's sake, a student comes to school one day and suddenly claims they have transitioned and now insists on using the bathroom or locker room consistent with their new gender? The student insists they are part of the protected class and the school must allow them to use whatever bathroom they wish. But let's say in this hypothetical, the school is highly suspicious the student is not being sincere and is attempting to, quote, mock the system. Remember, Outfront was specifically asked this very question by one of the board members last August. Outfront's response: don't worry about it. You will know if a student is genuinely transitioned or if they're just trying to mock the system. In other words, their advice to the school board is, you will know it when you see it. Really? So, who will make that determination? The teacher, the principal, the school board? So what happens when the student is denied access to the locker room of their choice, then sues the school claiming gender discrimination? Hasn't the school denied them the same protection as others in the protected class? How will the board respond? Does the board really want to try and defend a lawsuit by saying, yes, we refuse to give that student the same protection as other transgendered students because we knew they weren't really transgendered at all. They were just mocking the system. Which one of you wants to be the one to say that to the TV news reporters? Which one of you wants to testify to that in open court in front of the jury when this lawsuit goes to trial?
I'll do it.
So I will ask you, how does the school determine who is and who is not transitioned and therefore merits admission into the protected class? Any way you slice it, the board will likely find itself in legally contended position. The legal tightrope the school board is on just began.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to take you down.
The board has promised to make Becker schools safe and welcoming for all its students, not just a selected few in a protected class. While Outfront presented one viewpoint on the law last August, they did not tell you the entire legal story impacting our students. I hope my words tonight provide the board additional issues to consider as we chart a course ahead.
Yes, you have issues.
Thank you again for allowing us to be heard.
Oh, sorry.
It took courage to do so.
No. $1,800. Well, no. What is it? 16 the witch trials. As many as there were there. They actually brought that up in the first session. Witch trials.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you this evening. I am Julie Quist. Can you hear me?
No.
Unfortunately.
Is better? Okay.
Well,
Thank you for allowing me
questionable.
to speak to you this evening. I am Julie Quist with the Child Protection League. Our mission is to protect children from exploitation, indoctrination, and violence. Parents across the state express their great appreciation for the information we provide.
That you are a hate group.
We are mothers, we are grandmothers whose love for children comes from a commitment to the
Quit yelling.
well-being of children, all children, no matter their race, color, creed, or sexual identity.
What?
Tonight, I'm reviewing just a sampling of books and curriculum that frequently show up in schools in Minnesota as part of diversity, inclusion, and gender policies. To be clear, I am not aware of or have been informed of any of these particular books being currently present in the Becker schools.
Thank God.
As their use is so common, it certainly bears further investigation by the school board, whether they or others like them are currently available to the Becker students. As books and reading materials are brought into the schools, each needs to be viewed through the lens of whether they are the right choices for K-12 classrooms. So these are some examples. Starting with the youngest grades by Princess Boys, intended for ages 3 to 8.
Woo!
This book is about acceptance.
Woo!
Acceptance, love, and respect. Always essential lessons. But it also affirms and normalizes confusion about being a boy or a girl. A four-year-old boy likes pretty and sparkly things. He likes pink. He likes wearing dresses. Wearing dresses makes him happy. The story introduces the youngest of children to question whether being a boy or a girl is really something they are born with. It teaches that our feelings determine our sexual identity.
It teaches acceptance.
Absolutely.
Is what it is for. This story about a very famous boy named Jazz Jennings
Girl! Girl! Girl.
describes to very young children that having a girl brain in a boy body is called transgender, and that loving means affirming those feelings. It means
Yep.
we're born that way.
Yep.
Parents, teachers, friends are all expected to encourage Jazz's new identity,
Yep.
including using the girls' bathroom and playing on the girls' sports teams.
Yep.
I Am Jazz suggests to children that if they don't conform to typical gender stereotypes, they should question who they are.
Yep.
It also teaches that you are not born male or female.
Oh my God.
Okay, we're going to the genderbread person, preschool plus. This graphic and the next one, as well as one called Gender Gumby, are found today in many Minnesota preschools, kindergartens, and early grades. They have been used as part of the Minnesota Department of Education's training for teachers and administrators in what the department calls the continuums of gender and sexuality.
Woo!
Gender uniform, preschool and up. As is obvious, the target audience is very young.
Thank God.
These pictures describe a child's gender as being a mix and match of how you feel, what you like, how you act, as well as how you're born. They force every child to make their gender identity their own personal creation.
Woo!
They also force every child to discard the understanding that they are a boy or a girl by birth.
Crap.
The child must decide and choose who they are. With just a look, these pictures impose a false worldview on every very young child in the classroom.
Bull!
It's perfectly normal.
Acceptance. I like this book. Woo! I actually have all of these books. I love them.
It's perfectly normal defines transgender as, quote, someone who crosses from the gender that person was born with to the opposite gender, unquote.
Woo!
This crossing over is based on their feelings.
Nope.
Their thoughts. Quote, some may feel this way. This is a quote from them. Some may feel this way all the time. Others may feel this way for only a few months or a few years. And some may feel that sometimes they're one gender and sometimes they are the other gender.
Yep. That's called acceptance.
It's perfectly normal, completely adopts the view of gender as being
Fluid.
fluid. And
Woo!
rather than there being two genders that are based on biology, and it transfers that view of human beings onto young people as fact.
These.
What is your point here?
That's all the supporters. But here are all the unsupporters.
You want to end here?
Woo!
I think the school board's been aware of these books, and we thank you for that information.
Too bad. No, we're ending. They've already ruled to end. I thought we called the meeting.
That was it.
These materials are brought in under the umbrella of being inclusive.
Yep.
Massive supply of book titles is now available that normalize behaviors that violate the norms, values, and beliefs of many families and their community. Children are highly influenced by simple exposure to ideas by teachers they trust, then they adopt them.
Good.
Many parents are concerned that the genre of literature grooms children for accepting the norms presented to them, and that is their intention. Does gender inclusive mean that it's okay to violate the values and beliefs of the community? The school board has a responsibility to make that decision, and thank you so much.
It is. It's called acceptance. Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights.
Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights.
Why is she back? What?
Well, Joseph, this just make you so much more relieved to be in Becker? Like, I went to the one last week, and I couldn't believe how much I fucking lost it. I made fun of